what do we want to achieve. Having the first continent-wide conference in this format, I think what we want to achieve is not simple, but very clear. We want to change the way in which we work with the trade union movement on the continent. So what can we do? And what we have done thus far in the past, and I would like to appreciate that as well, is that we had project groups, the POAs. You're all aware of the POAs. There was a division-wide POA, Trade Union Transformation, a POA in the region, trying to reflect on challenges and new approaches. And I think these groups have been very successful. But from those lessons learned and ideas, we have to move broader and involve all teams and colleagues, and that's why we are here.
My expectations, so as somehow being one of the two hosts of this event, is that, I mean, we gathered all national offices, all regional offices represented by the directors, the resident representatives, and the project managers in charge of trade union work. And my expectations with regards to this gathering is that at the end of the 5 days meeting, all of us, or let's say most of us, have a clear idea about what unions, or what the responsibilities of unions in the respective countries should be, how we as FES can support them to actually be more powerful, be more efficient and more innovative organizations, and most importantly, what our role within this process can be and should be. So I'll say that it's quite clear that unions need to change in Africa, but in order for us to be part of it, the FES also needs to change to a certain degree, and my expectations are clearly that towards the end of this 5 days conference, we all know what this change should be looking like.
But this cannot come through head offices. This has to come through an internal reform process, not from labor service organizations, but from independent rank and file reform movements inside the unions themselves. And I think this has implications for where we position our own education. If we are training head office to reform unions, I think it's putting the fox in charge of the hen house. Building counterpower and counterculture. We need a careful, consistent building of a powerful union movement, but the powerful union movement is partly about democratic structure. It is also partly about promoting critical thought, bigger perspectives, political education, the organizational, ideological, and technical capacities of the working class to change and self-manage society. This requires a strategy and vision. That requires learning from the past of unions. It requires evaluating national context and the international context. It requires understanding there is no homogeneous African trade union or trade union situation. There is no one size fits all. There are contradictions within Africa, for example, between big powers like South Africa and its neighbors. And I think we should not romanticize an African way. It's just as complex as everywhere else.
We felt on the one hand we need to clarify FES's role. What exactly, how do we see ourselves in the context of trade union cooperation? And one question that came up, are we happy with the role of being a permanent actor in this field, or do we actually think that that will lead to too much dependency on the side of some of our partners? The key questions came when we talked about this double-sided challenge. On the one hand, we feel that we need to contribute, that we need to promote that trade unions play a larger role when it comes to societal change, to bring change towards a whole society and play their role as such, as transformative organizations. At the same time, we have said we want to empower the membership basis. The membership is way too weak and the influence must be strengthened. So those in theory are very different points of entry.
What do we expect from this conference? We were very clear that at the end of the conference, we want to have a clear guideline. We called it also a framework or a strategy for sustainability and continuity of our work, to move away from ad hoc programs with our trade union partners. We also really want a clarification on FES role in this transformation journey, because we want to have transformative programming, but what is the role of the FES in that? what would be our contribution is really our different country experiences, realizing that trade unions are different throughout the continent, and also our personal experiences for both resident representatives and program managers.
I think in Mozambique they're trying to fight for the slice. They're not even thinking about a bakery yet, but they're probably staying a little bit with crumbs at the moment. In Mozambique we are very far away from what has been talked about as standard employment situation. We have a very big informal economy that is not covered by legal labor and social protection standards. 80% of the workforce is in agriculture, and most of it is subsistence farming. And even the formalized worker, 60% of the formalized worker do not earn a living wage in the sense of covering their livelihoods. So that's a dire situation.
In our group, we discussed what resonates with us and agreed that, yes, you have unions torn between being political or not, and then there's also that discussions about using, their participation in politics as a springboard to venturing into politics, and then there's that tendency not to be able to represent the interest of their members, as they go into politics. And then we also found very interesting the experience in South Africa about the relationship between the trade union and the political party, the ANC. It's similar to what you have in Germany with the relationship with the DGB and the SPD. But there's also been there's also been that discourse about the tension as a result of a new neoliberal world. So I think that that's something that we discussed in the group.
Ich glaube, die FES ist eine der wenigen Stiftungen, die anerkannt ist, mit Arbeitnehmervertreterinnen und Arbeitnehmervertretern zu arbeiten und vor allen Dingen auch dann Input zu geben, ohne über die Köpfe der Menschen hinweg zu arbeiten. Die Bedürfnisse zu hören, aber auch zu vergleichen, wo in der Welt gibt es denn ähnliche Ansätze und wie ist damit umgegangen worden, und diese Erfahrung mitzunehmen und auch weiterzugeben.
It's a crucial question you have to ask yourself with any kind of engagement, right? I think that's where it starts. But our recommendation is that we took a bit of soul searching to get there. A context-sensitive approach, that's value-based, should be applied to strengthen democracy from below in the trade unions. I know that sounds like a UN declaration.
Can you yeah. What do you mean with value-based? Do you have the concrete?
Value-based, like along our FES.
The values that, social democratic values.
Yeah, all our work is based on those values, right? Mm-hmm. So that's what it also should be applied, and not then be happy with.
Which pulls pretty much towards the same direction as the last recommendation, right? So you'd like to stand in for your positions strongly, and
as Keith said, if you work with the trade union leadership where we also have trust in, that doesn't mean that you always have to be the opposition to something, but it's about democratic principles and working that. I think that discussion, to clarify, that comes from that, of course, the trade union work happens in very different contexts, in more autocratic contexts, in more democratic contexts, and that the trade unions are also a reflection of the society they are in. So sometimes that makes the world much more harder and difficult to talk about these things, but we should not lose sight of our values while remaining context sensitive.
On the FES side, we expect FES to be an active partner in the process, and that the FES should give unions more space the FES should be more patient and tolerant with unions. And for this to work, there should be clear cooperation project objectives between the FES and the unions. As far as the responsibilities of the unions are concerned, we expect them to be the drivers of the transformation, and unions should be given ownership of their projects. For a positive impact, we think that if there is sustainable consultation, exchanges with all stake actors at all the levels of the processes, there will be a great impact.
Well, I think Justina already have alluded to the fact that you are dealing with a multinational company that comes from a non-trade union culture, a very hostile multinational company, not only, as Gabby said, in Africa, but also in their own country. That's how they treat workers. So here in the continent, we are talking about a no trade union zone environment. They don't want unions to organize. They, as Justina said, low pay, long hours of work, poor occupational health and safety, not only in terms of PPEs, but also in terms of the infrastructure they use. They bring poor, low standard kind of machinery, and they want to use their own things that they are brought from China. So these are challenges. And secondly, together with the precarious employment that they are giving, it is short-term employment. It is also no social security for workers. So it is this kind of challenges that we have to deal with. Sometimes it is also abuses human rights. I can give you an example where a Chinese employer has kicked, beaten a worker in Zambia.
I think it's much relevant. Remember, IFES in Namibia have been there for a long time. IFES have been always assisting trade union work in Namibia for a very quite, even before I came in the trade union movement. Although there was a breakdown, I think whatever we have discussed is in line of what Namibia labor movement need at this moment. We have to move in a way of transformation, which FES is talking about, although it needs to be handled with care because of certain different issues surrounding that. But I think it's coming at the right time, whereby we need to be able to see how we can be able to move together of what have been discussed here at the strategic conference. I think it came at the right time where we are now currently in Namibia, whereby the labor movement need to change ways how we do things.
I think that these power resources here are no more or no less than power resources. They are potentialities. They are potentialities, because we can say here in Dar es Salaam, you've got public transport. It's almost entirely run by these buses. Dala drivers. They, of course, have the potential, I want to come back to that, the potential to bring the city to a standstill. But in order to do that, you need certain, what we're going to call capabilities. So in this approach, we talk not only about power resources, but also about capabilities. In other words, the ability to turn potential into actual, realizable power.
I think that we believe that we need to ease in with the conversation. about feminist ideas, about the fact that women deserve a seat within our organization because they are part of the organization. And we are under no illusion that there are still a couple of comrades that don't believe in that, you know. And unfortunately, that is still the majority thinking. You just have to go to a Nuwatu conference, you know, to know exactly what I mean, you know. So what we are saying is that we think that we have the right instruments. So I'm not going to ask them tomorrow, you must be feminist and you must support feminism, you know. What we're going to ask them to do is to implement a policy decision. Number one, you will have 40% of women within the structures that we have, and you will support within the alliance the demands that we are going to put forward in support of women's rights. And so through that we hope, and it is our hope, that those will be the correct instruments to change the mindset and to change the thinking.
FES's role. What exactly is our role? What's our place? How far can we go? That definitely stood out for me. That was on the first day. And as the days have gone along, the discussion in terms of who exactly is involved in transformation, how do we define the transformation, and once again FES's role in that transformation, that those two have really stood out for me. Yeah.
I think there's lots of consensus that we need a more strategic and more political approach to work with union, but you can only do that if you work with a partner that's internally democratic and shares the values and ideas that we work for as FES. So I think with a vision that looks into how can we work more strategically, how can we work more politically, but how can we do that first of all with the unions and their membership, and then also engage unions in discussion that go beyond their membership. That's really a two-step way of doing things, and that aligns, I think, with the general consensus in the room that there is a need to work more politically, more strategically, with more democratic union.
Well, and if we do that, then in 2020 already we can do an evaluation, not of what we have achieved, of course not. We said this needs time, but of the change process, of the strategizing process thus far. There might be first visible results. I mean, you know, you can ask those colleagues in the countries which have participated in the POA how long it took to start, how long to engage with the sectoral, private sector union. You know, it's the point. As has been mentioned, you can't just go there and say we do it differently now. It takes time. But how this first process works, how the strategizing and adapting and rebalancing, we had all these nice words, you know, I think we need to evaluate, because otherwise we don't know whether we are overall on the right track. And that should be, in my opinion, as soon as 2020. It's also when we are in our first year of the FFA, so we can then adapt things. Key steps: application for renewal, Fortführungsantrag, strategy workshops at country office level, a change report, and of course exchange about it among everybody and also vis-à-vis headquarters.